Hi there, this is The Bloom Show, brought to you by New Bloom Solutions and Above All Flowers, and I am Sahid Nahim, your host. Thank you for joining us today. I'm super excited to have another sector of the industry that we rarely have on. And as you know, the purpose of this show is to help the floral industry innovate, connect, and bloom through community, networking, and just communication and sharing. I'm really happy to have the owner and founder of Flower Moxie, DIY flowers for vibrant renegades. And that is an awesome line because Amy McCord Jones is just that in a sense. Her voice and tone is killer. And I really enjoyed learning a little bit more about her through our conversations and also doing some research. And if you do check out the content that they create, it's super exciting. We'll also talk about that. But we're also going to talk about how the industry could help this business model and how this business model is here to stay. So I do encourage farms, distributors, and wholesalers to listen up because the regular business model of brick and mortar or what have you is changing, is here to stay, but there's additional business models. I almost consider e-commerce to be almost a new sector of the flower industry or an existing sector of the flower industry, but that's only my opinion. So please allow me to introduce to you and bring on Amy McCord Jones, the owner and founder of Flower Moxie. Hi there, Amy.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for sharing your time and your wisdom that you're about to share with us. Thank you so much for being here, Amy. I got to speak to you for a couple minutes and learn so much about your business, and I can't wait to share that with everybody. So thank you again, Miss Amy.
Thank you.
Awesome. So Amy, let's get right into it. Tell us about yourself. And I usually do like to ask where people came from, because I think it's very important to share your backstory to understand how backstories and past experiences add value to your current experience, right? To your vision and your mission. So tell us about yourself and what was your background and how you got involved with Flower Moxie.
Yeah, it was a very windy road. I don't know exactly how I ended up here, but it worked very well. So my background is I'm from Oklahoma, so I grew up kind of a poor country girl. Spent a lot of time outside, so I was very curious and mainly having more humble beginnings. It made me feel like I had something to prove. Not so much in a way that I felt like I had to be, extremely successful. I was just very curious, and I wanted to get out there and see what the world was about and what I would be good at. And so just like most people when they're young, they start out, you try to figure out what's going to be a good fit for you. So I started out like wanting to be a helicopter pilot. So I pursued that for a little bit, and I realized like really quickly that wasn't the life for me. And then what I ended up settling on in college was forensics. So I think I had seen like the Bone Collector a few weeks prior to the syllabus. And when I saw that available, I thought, oh, I'll be good at that. And, my parents kind of tried to dissuade me a little bit. They were like, oh, it's a little bit much. And I felt like, at 18, I knew better. So I got my degree in forensics, and I realized I think I called my sister and I was like, this shit's dark.
It's dark.
And it's funny how like things converge. So having that science background can make me be very methodical in my steps and systemize things, which has helped me later. And in my 20s, I just took random jobs. I had like corporate jobs, and I was trying to find my talent and what I was good at. I had a lot of enthusiasm, but I couldn't find that exact angle. And it was about 2007, and this little chapel went for sale in Paseo, which is a little art district in Oklahoma City. And it was a really good price. It was $125,000, and I did not have that, but my mom did, and she bought the chapel, and my sister and I we made business cards and called ourselves wedding planners. So I had this corporate job, but I wanted to try, being a business owner because the other things I had pursued just wasn't this fit. And so we got our first client, and she didn't have a florist. And this is back in
Amy?
2000 rose bouquet, and I thought, well, I think I can make that. And so I ordered like 200 roses off of Sam's Club, and that's how I got my start. I mean, it was not something I was proud of, like my first wedding. Like looking back, they were like just very tight, roses and balls. But that's how I got my start. And then I just realized I loved flowers, and I loved the design and the creative aspect, and that's how it came about. So it was very much a windy road, but I do find that it all worked out for the best.
I'm pretty sure many people started that way. Now it's what you did after that, right? So that's awesome. I do want to take a moment and ask people, please comment, ask questions. This is for the community. This is for the flower industry to learn. So if you're a grower or a florist and want to ask any questions, please do. As Amy's super open, so please feel free, and don't forget to subscribe so you're never missing an episode. But gotta say that. But Amy, so let me ask you. So how did you come up with Flower Moxie?
So a few different things happened that made me think of the idea. So I had been a wedding planner and florist at that point for a while, and had done hundreds of weddings. So I was starting to get a little bit restless again, and I wanted to, I think, have a new challenge. And at the same time, I would have clients come and they would want to hire my services, but they didn't hit my floral minimum, which was $2,500. Which, isn't extremely high, but when folks would come with a $500 budget or $1,000 budget for their florals, as a florist, you can't take that on and be profitable. And I didn't like turning them away. It felt, it just made me feel bad to say, like, I can't take you on because you don't have a large enough budget. And at the same time, my wholesaler, one day we were talking, and she was kind of venting, and she said, it's really hard because with globalization and the way things have changed, you have some florists going farm direct, and it kind of cuts us out. And so we have more loss, and we're not able to move the product that we were able to move before. Mm-hmm. And I was just kind of driving down the road, and I thought, with these clients that come to me, maybe I can sell them flowers, and I can just teach them how to put it together, because I can figure out the math of what needs to go where in the recipes, and I can do a tutorial and show anybody how to make a bouquet. So I just thought, well, I'll just make this little website, and it was a side hustle. So I went to my wholesaler and I said, would you sell to me if I sold to DIY brides, if I handled the customer service aspect, placed the order these folks that want flowers, but they're not able to really get their hands on them in smaller quantities. So you could buy in bulk, but people wanted more variation. Mm-hmm. So that's ultimately how I cooked up that business model.
And then tell us, you gave me some insight, which I was impressed with. How there's some people say it but don't do it, So what's the difference between your model and everyone else's model, let's say, which was really interesting to me.
I think the biggest difference is that our flowers are sourced from U.S. wholesalers. So Flower Moxie, most companies buy direct from the farms and ship in, large boxes. I feel like the best flowers come from professional U.S. wholesalers. As a florist, that's where I get my flowers. There's so much consistency, really good service. They're able to buy on the Dutch market and get that, those brownie tulips that you can't find. And I wanted to be able to take that money and take it locally to that client's floral community. So initially, my business model, I had about 85 wholesalers across the country that I worked with. And the reason why I did that was to avoid a lot of shipping and shipping delays. Yeah, and so yeah, so people could drive to the wholesale and just pick up their order. And that was how I got started. Now, since the pandemic, that had to change a bit just because, some folks went out of business and went bankrupt. And once I started to scale, I needed more consistency. So I still work with US wholesalers, but I've narrowed it down to just a handful rather than 80, 85.
And since the pandemic, is there any best practices that you learned that you're still sticking with them, that you had to pivot, but it's a pivot that you wish you would have done earlier, I guess?
Probably. It usually takes, basically hitting a rough time to pivot, because it doesn't seem like we do it unless we're forced to. Um, I think I think it's helped create consistency. And I try to talk more since the pandemic. I try to be a little bit more open, which we've always been, but I try to be a bit more front page that you have to have flexibility in floral types, because you can still get the same look if you need to swap out a sweet Eskimo with a pink Mondial.
Yep.
And so I think overall, florists in general have to become more flexible since the pandemic, just because there's this scarcity and things are harder to get. So I try to convey that to my clients, and that's a little bit trickier because if you're not in the industry, you don't understand that something can be on crop one week and be off crop the next, or it can come in and it looks rough and you can't sell it, so you need to do a swap. So that's the hard thing to convey to my clients, and we try to be very open about that so they know that they're going to get a beautiful outcome, but there might have to be a swap from a Lysianthus to a ranunculus.
Makes sense, and I think there was a movement some years ago, and continues to be. It's sell on variety, not color, right? It'll save you a lot more time. So, any tips on that for any of your floral industry peers on selling on variety, not color? What are the benefits of that?
I didn't hear that last part.
So selling and quoting on color, not variety. So
Yes.
many florists sometimes say, yeah, I'll get you that amnesia, but don't realize that you have another option or two. And you're saying that you also speak to your DIY brides and kind of educating them. So anything that you kind of say to them that really sticks, any way to get that message really across?
I think what makes the most sense when I'm like speaking specifically to a DIY bride is I explain, when you're a DIY bride, you're ordering specific flowers and you're very up close to every item that you're going to get. Where when you hire a florist, you're very insulated from that. Like as a florist, in my quote, I would write out, here's the flowers that I'm, probably going to use. It's not limited to these. And when I handed off that bouquet, that bride didn't look at it and say, hey, why is there a ranunculus and not a Lysianthus? They don't think of it that way. So when you're a florist and you hand it off, the customer is really just looking at overall, does this palette work? Is this what I envisioned? Is this what we discussed? Where when it's DIY and they're real up close to it, they can feel very, very stressed if you have to do a rose swap out. And when I explain that to them, it more eases their mind to know that this is going to turn out and look just as beautiful.
And I see a DIY bride as a potential future florist, right? Am I right or am I wrong?
You are so right. So I've had quite a few customers start like a floral side hustle, and then some have gone on to be full-time florists. They get their own shop. One girl who used to work with me, she was like one of my first customers in like year 1 or 2. And she went on to be like a part-time florist, and she came to work for Flower Moxie. And then she decided to, be a full-time florist because she loves it so much. And that really surprised me. Just the amount of interest, and afterwards clients come back and they're like, hey, can we order flowers from you again? Because we had so much fun doing it. And it was like the thing that I was most proud about in my wedding. So that was a very pleasant surprise.
I have a quick little comment here from Linda Burgos. Good point, Amy. Flexibility is important. I always ask the customer, is it the flower or the look you need?
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Thank you, Linda. Thank you for that. Let me get to the next questions. What what difficulties do you find most e-commerce floral companies face? And yeah, I think in general, but I'd love to kind of hear what happened through COVID. But what is the general difficulties that floral e-commerce businesses face? And I hope I'm saying it the right way.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I feel that there's two different challenges. There's the back end side, which means anybody can create a Shopify store. The problem is how to manage those orders. So a Shopify or e-commerce store will capture that order. Where the difficulty is you have to hold those orders and make sure you order the flowers in time and get them, get those flowers out the door and into the arms of your customer on time. And so we spent a lot of years building out this back-end system because I would lose sleep. I was like so afraid that an order would slip through the cracks. So I had to create this custom order management system that had triggers on orders that would get flagged of like, hey, this order wasn't confirmed yet, or this order hasn't been submitted yet. Because I take an order and sometimes have to hold it for an entire year. And so that was a definite challenge. So getting your back-end order management system all laid out for an e-commerce store is not easy. And then on the front end side, I would say we're very good about trying to communicate realistic expectations, but that doesn't mean that your customer is always going to listen. So as a florist, I know the flowers aren't going to fall out of the box looking baller the first day. They may not read it, they may forget, and when they open that box and everything's all packed tight, they panic. And so I think that the challenge for me on the front end is communicating to customers of like, being a florist is a real job, and I have all the education for you, but just because you're DIYing doesn't mean that you don't have to face the reality of being a florist, which is guard petals, wiring ranunculus, clipping off, a bug nibbled leaf. So a lot of times there's customers that it really rattles them when they get their flowers and things don't look exactly like they look on Pinterest. And you just have to kind of keep reminding them, you've got to work your product, you've got to build it, and your outcome is going to be beautiful, but it's a process. So that is a challenge.
During COVID, we saw the transition of florists going into educator, right? It was just it was a necessity. And I interviewed, over 100 florists through 6 months or something like that with the Berkeley show that I kind of started this all off with. And I would always ask them if they were afraid that they were educating or creating their own competitors. And they always said no. And I don't find that a DIY model is creating competitors or taking away from your own business. You're actually educating them and creating a new appreciation for what florists and designers and floral artists do. Do you also see that?
That's what I hope. I always ask, like anytime I'm interviewing, a potential employee, I always ask them, who is Flower Moxie's competitors? And most often they'll say, well, florists. And that's always such a good teaching moment because a florist, like DIY isn't in competition with a florist. I never lost, because I didn't retire being a florist until 2020, but I never lost a wedding to Flower Moxie. It usually boils down to budget because my average order with Flower Moxie is around $650. And that's not in the same, market group as what a florist, what am I trying to say? That's not the same client. They don't have the same budget. And so I think an important message, just because I was a florist for 14 years, is that DIY is an anti-florist. It's just another option for folks who can't simply afford it. I would say about 75% my client of people, they just always dreamt of doing their own flowers, and that really excites them to see anemones in the flesh and put it all together. And then probably 10% of the client base is actual new florists who they're not able to shop at wholesale yet. Maybe they haven't gotten all their tax stuff situated. And so they come to Flower Moxie as a resource, and we give them a discount and help them like put together recipes, or they'll send us a photo and say, hey, how should I handle this? Like, what's the mechanics behind this? And I love being that resource because I was self-taught with like my boxes of Sam's Club flowers. That would have really helped me. So it always, I always feel like sharing education is never a bad thing. Like, it doesn't take away from you. It doesn't take away from your business. And it actually has,
and I honestly think that a DIY, and I'm Callie's putting a question here, and I'll bring her in. It's a little edgy question, but I'll bring it in. But in all reality, I do think that there's different levels of expertise. A DIY can only get this far until they become a florist themselves, right? So if you're, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, but to do a flower arc or a flower wall, or to really, really deep work that takes a lot of technical experience, and mechanical experience, and knowing the mechanics of design, it's a different world. So they're going to do the simple things, but when they want to go big, they're going to bring in an expert. Am I right or wrong?
You're absolutely right. And when I was like my only employee, and I would get all of the emails, sometimes people would legitimately send me pictures of like Kim Kardashian's wedding. And I'm like, you need to run, not walk to a florist. So we always try to be very upfront, especially our custom designers who are florists that freelance. I tell them, I'm like, if they bring something to the table, it is your responsibility to say that's not a DIY situation. Like,
exactly,
you're going to just crash and burn. Because to me, I love to sell flowers, but I don't want to sell flowers at the expense of a bride being so stressed out the week of her wedding. And so it's our responsibility to say, you need to hire a florist or change your plans. Like, you don't need to make 30 tall centerpieces. Maybe make 5, and then, maybe do some greenery and candles. But you're absolutely right. It's a real job, and it's a real skill. And I can only teach up to I can only teach
to such a level. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and someone put it, I think I did it, but it's like, you go buy wood at Home Depot, but you can't build a house. You need a contractor for that.
Exactly.
Right? You can buy everything at Home Depot. You need to build a house, and you can build a house at Home Depot, but you certainly need the technique and skill and experience. So Callie's asking, and by the way, Callie used to be one of my buyers when I used to sell, and Callie was awesome, such a great person to work with, and such a, how you get more bees with honey? Callie was it. So yeah, for sure. So do you think that people wanting DIY their flowers would even want to use a florist anyways? I feel like you're making it easier and more accessible for those Pinterest loving brides to do flowers. What are your thoughts with that?
Yeah, I think I would say that's a really good question, and I don't know if I'm going to have an accurate answer. I think that you have a mix. You have people who are very artistic and creative, and they want to give it a shot. I think most of the time, if they had the budget, they would probably opt to hire a florist. And it means that maybe they want to, allocate that money to something else. Maybe they need to hire a videographer, or they're trying to save up to go on a honeymoon, which is not something, you can DIY as far as videography. And so they will look at the budget that they have, and they'll try to allocate those funds in a way that's, a priority for them.
Makes sense. And then Linda, and thank you guys for chiming in so much, Callie and Linda. Usually a florist will not sell to a bride DIY either. So it's not competition to a florist. So that's what Linda is saying. And sorry, we kind of get stuck on that topic. I told you that happens to me. I love things and I get stuck with them. And then one question. Let me see. Give me a second. I'm so sorry. I wanted to talk about, before I get into the other question, and that's why I was kind of deciding to ask a question or not, is your voice and tone. So you have, and I'm going to say this out loud, I never use curse words. You have a kick-ass voice and tone, and I say that for a reason, and that's the G-rated version of it. But tell us a little bit about your voice and tone, And how did you come up with it? And I encourage everybody to watch because it's really entertaining and it's almost like hanging out with the cool person at school. So tell us about your voice and tone.
Well, so when I built my first rough draft of my website, I used kind of all the sleepy language, and then my best friend turned me onto this blog called the Middle Finger Project, and she is really good at marketing. She has a very edgy tone herself, and I started reading her content, and I thought, I'm not getting anybody's attention with this, and this isn't really this isn't really my voice. Like the words, these boring descriptions is that's not really who I am. And I thought, well, why don't you just kind of let your freak flag fly because it's your business, so you can. So I came out with I tried to formulate this brand voice, and also I found the wedding industry to be kind of snobby, especially if you didn't have a big budget. And I think that was a sensitive place for me because growing up like the poor country kid, I never wanted to exclude somebody if they didn't have a big budget. And I think that was a pain point for me when turning someone away if they didn't meet my budget minimum as a florist.
Sorry.
It's snobby. It can be a bit funner, a little bit edgier. Not everyone's going to be into my humor, but that's okay because if you try to talk to everybody, then you're not carving out who your clients really are. And so I met this incredible girl, Morgan Moran, and she has a killer writing voice. And so she has been instrumental in locking in that brand voice. So I'll write something and it will be funny, and then I kick it to her, and then she makes it brilliant. So I would love to take all the credit, but she is a fierce writer.
I'm just thinking of some stuff I've seen, like the booby vase and all that cool stuff. And it's just so laid back and creative that I can't but get connected with it and saying, this is awesome, man. This is a voice and a tone that I can dig. Let me say, so the main question is, and that's why I love to bring people from other sectors, is how can other sectors in the industry help you? So how can logistics be more accessible to you? How can wholesalers help? How can maybe even distributors or farms? What is a sector that could help the e-commerce sector, even though your model's a little different, but what are some sectors that could collaborate better with e-commerce overall?
I think folks being open-minded to the fact that the world and the industry is changing. I feel like they've really helped me, especially wholesalers. When I would first call, I only had a few wholesalers turn me down, but it was very out of the box. And I would say 20 years ago, there wouldn't have been a snowball's chance to sell to somebody who was trying to serve a DIY client. So I think being open-minded, making sure that, what am I trying to say? To make sure that they're being open-minded, but also maintaining the integrity of what's important to them in their business. I would say for florists, if a client comes to you and they don't have much of a budget for you to work with and you're not able to take them on, I think pointing them in the DIY direction is helpful, because we point clients to florists all the time. Like if it logistically doesn't make sense, I'm like, you need to hire a florist and go that route. So I think maybe not leaving a client hanging and just say, sorry, you don't hit my minimum. Maybe say, and it doesn't have to be my website, but there's places with education, and we think that you can lock in this vision if you are open to DIYing. So I don't know if that quite answers your question.
Yeah, close. No worries. And then another question is, where do you see the entire floral industry going in the next 5 years? Or where do you see e-commerce? What's the next level? What's the next big thing for e-commerce?
Oh man, if we all had that crystal ball. I think we're all kind of wondering since the pandemic. I think that's been the thing that has hit the industry the hardest. I find that the interest in flowers is not going to decline. I think
Mhm.
that you're seeing such an increase of just attention and interest from all different folks that they want fresh flowers in their house. And as far as for weddings, the stage has been set with blogs and Pinterest. So when I was a new florist, like I said, people would bring a magazine clipping and want something very simple. And now people email and they're like, "Can you get butterfly ranunculus in Japanese anemone?" And
Yeah,
I'm like,
education.
"How do you know what that is?" So so folks who aren't even in the industry, they have like very specific tastes. They're excited about really specific flowers. And I don't think that's going to change. So over the next 5 years, I just think that you're going to see more e-commerce floral businesses popping up to try to serve that need.
Okay.
And then I think the only thing that I'm nervous about, and I'm hearing this secondhand, so maybe you can confirm this, but I hear that it's like a challenge because since the pandemic and you had these farms going bankrupt, and so corporations have come in and purchased them, and they're selling direct to grocery stores, and so it's putting a little bit more scarcity for florists and wholesalers. Is that accurate or is that true?
So yes, so from what we've heard in the past, that does seem to be a situation, but I think they're getting past it because we did do some research or some surveys to ask if florists during Valentine's Day, if they received and wholesalers what they wanted, and most of them said that there wasn't a supply chain issue much. There is obviously logistics issues, and there are going to be some difficulties in finding certain varieties like white roses all of a sudden, but that's can't find a white rose. There's other things, but I get it. I might just make some enemies there, but maybe white ranunculus. But yeah, there's still stress into the whole supply chain. There's some stress, but we're having better years, and I imagine you as well, better years than many. One, because the prices are higher, so it's a balance. It's not that there's a lot more product; it's just that the prices are a bit higher as well because of just inflation and all. But that is a valid point, and that is an issue that incurring, but I don't think it's holding back the industry. We're growing more than ever throughout the years, so that's super exciting. Did I answer that question for you? Thank you for asking me a question.
Because you'll hear little rumors and you'll feel scared and you're like, what's going to happen? I think probably everyone feels a little unstable after 2 years of a pandemic.
So I'm going to give a plug, and I just spoke to you about it. I'm just coming, and I'm so inspired and jonesing from SAF, Society of American Florists, CAD, Congressional Action Day, and that is a place that you come in and you could be a fly on the wall with these councils, different councils, and also with the future task force, and those are topics that were spoken of, right? And those are things that you can get a real insight because you're listening from the top level down in that information. So I encourage anybody, and sorry, I didn't mean to do a commercial here, but I do encourage everybody to check out Congressional Action Day because that's the kind of insight that is no longer a rumor. You're hearing it from the horse's mouth when you're there. So sorry for pitch. I wasn't planning to do that, but I have a last question, and I remember that, and I'm sorry to throw this at you. And by the way, Amy, you've done an amazing job because a lot of these questions haven't been pre-planned, and that's just what you get with me. But one final question that I usually ask is, in one word or a couple of words, how would you define 2021? And then in a couple of words, how would you define 2022 for you and your company, or for the flower industry, however you want to go?
The flower industry or for my company?
You choose.
Okay. So for 2021, I would say they were bouncing back. I think that was just watching the wholesalers, the florists, the brides, like everybody. They were really bouncing back. They were working so hard, and I think for 22, it's pure optimism. I think that everyone, we've all been a bit through the ringer in the industry, and I feel that there are some definite unknowns, but I definitely feel like optimism is what I'm feeling.
That's awesome. Great. And that's That's what I'm feeling. So that's what I said. Yeah, that's because there was bounce back, and now it's optimism and growth and community and collaboration, and those are the things that I'm feeling as well. And I see a lot of that happening. And even you coming on to the show, that's collaboration and support and building community within the industry. So thank you so much for that. How do people get in touch with you? I have an email here. You mind if I share it?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, great. So it's hello@Flower Moxie, and we also have the website flowermoxie.com that you could check it out, and hello@Flower Moxie. So Miss Amy, thank you so much for your time. I truly appreciated you coming on here, spending your time sharing your words of wisdom and your experiences, and really giving us an insight into the industry. And we're here for anything you need. And thank you again, Amy. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So take care, Amy. I'll see you soon.
Okay.
Have a good one. So that, as I always say, it was awesome and exciting because we get to see another model, another sector in our industry that is super innovative, but with a purpose. It was a purpose of keeping the business within the local community as well, and helping to serve the underserved, right? The people that couldn't afford to do a full-fledged wedding. And we also learned that many people believe that it's not a competition to florists, that it's just an addition. And like, I believe that it just adds more value and appreciation for what the experts do in the industry, right? And that's a real thing. Floral florists are artists nowadays. It's not just just create something on a vase anymore. It's just the things that they do is mind-blowing, and I could never touch that ever, and many people can never achieve that. So a business like Flower Moxie and many other models that are out there are just giving more availability and more reach to people to appreciate flowers and to appreciate florists when they mess their design up or not. They kind of understand that they need that other expertise as well. So again, thank you so much to Amy McCord Jones for joining us. We truly appreciate it. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share so you won't miss another episode. Next month, we have some amazing episodes. If you want to become a part of our newsletter, go to newbloomsolutions.com, and there you could sign up for our newsletter so that you'll get heads up on what we're doing next, so that you're aware, and you can always stay tuned to YouTube and sign up here again on YouTube so you're not missing an episode. If you want to be a part of YouTube, reach out. As you know, the Bloom Show is to help the floral industry innovate, connect, and bloom. So if you ever have any questions or want to collaborate with us or want to help out, we're big supporters of startups, and we want to truly become a community for startups to help connect you with any service or solution that you need, but really to be there to give you that moral support and say it's different to the industry. We want you because we think that different is very good for the health of our industry. So again, thank you again to Amy for joining, and thank you to everybody for joining, and thank you, Kelly, Linda, for chiming in. That always makes it very interesting and fun. Thank you again, everybody, and see you next time.